You noticed that Netflix came out already. When do you have time to watch Netflix?
Going good?
Yeah, our office is in the square. Right across there. No, I didn't.
A real mic.
What is that?
That clock's
Yeah, it's the townhouse development.
Should we have the maps? Should we have maps? Should we have a map here to look at?
Yeah, that's on the
Yeah,
agenda.
that's later.
That's later.
Yeah, but whatever.
So, we'll put one here as,
Okay.
are you noticing?
I'll grab the, there you go. Sign up sheet there too.
Got it?
I'll see you can't sneak a peek, you know, since they didn't present it.
He says,
Okay, I'd like to call the Windsor Township Planning Commission meeting of December 19 to order. Do we have a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of October 17?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion, a second.
I'll second it.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of October 17?
I'll approve. I'll make that motion.
We have a motion, a second.
I'll second it.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Public comments.
Mr. Chairman, I think everyone, the people who signed that are on the agenda under new business. So
Yes.
people probably. okay.
Yeah, you don't have an objection to us moving down the agenda, then, thank you. Okay, then under old business, we have 3 items there. Mountain Trail Solar. As indicated, the hearings are continuing. The next one is the 17th and 18th planned for January at 5:30,
At the high school.
and that's at the high school. Is there anything else
No.
to communicate?
High school or middle school?
High school.
It's at the high, it was in the
Moved to the
middle
high
school,
school.
but now it's at the high school.
Okay.
It's about halfway in, the entrance about halfway along the building, you know, there's a couple, multiple entrances there. Probably the western
it's the opposite
western
entrance.
one,
Just
not
go
the
to
west
opposite
end, but
Yeah.
more towards the west.
Yeah.
There was a sign, I think,
Yeah, right.
we usually have a
If
sign
one
there.
parks in the front of the building,
Yeah.
it's be marked.
All right, Rains Construction, cement plant, is there any movement on that at this point?
Nothing new, I haven't heard anything new.
No.
No movement on that. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of General Services, Snyder subdivision, that has to do with off
Yeah, I
of
think they just had to get
Mountain
the
Road there.
plans
I think
signed and
that's-
recorded.
yeah.
They haven't done that, so.
I haven't even heard from him though.
No, I haven't either.
Yes, I haven't heard a word.
So that's still hanging there.
Yeah,
Right, I mean, as far as our books and whatever, as far as the fee that they submitted for that, I haven't, Mr. Snyder hasn't contacted the township at all. So from our end, there's still some issues with this as far as us closing that, so,
correct, yeah. No, I just haven't heard from Mr. Snyder,
right.
so I don't
He
know
he
what,
didn't buy the state property yet.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you know he didn't?
Yeah.
Well, then he didn't, yeah, I don't
Okay,
know.
well,
There's
then-
problems going on with the
Okay.
state now, I guess.
So it's still,
It's-
we're
it's
still
still-
on.
still on.
That would be out of our hands until he
Exactly.
resolves that.
I guess it passed the Senate, but the House now got to vote on it for them to sell that piece.
No?
But that's hearsay, I don't take my word as,
They had me write a letter, I wrote a zoning determination a while ago. That was months ago.
I worked with his grandfather.
Oh, okay. So you know, I wrote
I know a
that,
little bit, I don't know about your letter.
I just wrote a zoning determination months ago for
No, I don't
that
know about your
piece.
letter.
But anyway,
Okay.
nothing
So,
yet.
so nothing
No,
before us,
No.
nothing before us at this point.
Not yet.
Okay, new business. As indicated, the South Schuylkill Property Group LLC, they proposed self-storage facility. I'm assuming it's Gretchen and Ryan?
Correct.
Yeah, if you have a presentation or something to show there, you could prop that up, or if it's the same as what's in front of
Yeah,
us.
it is, just so we can give you an idea. My name is Gretchen Stearns. I'm an attorney in Pottsville. I represent South Schuylkill. I'm here with Ryan with respect to just I wouldn't even call it a sketch plan, a general layout plan with respect to proposing some storage units along Route 61 and Shopple Road within the township. The reason we asked to be on your agenda is when my clients first started looking at the property, I had a conversation with the township solicitor, and he suggested reaching out to you and starting with coming to this board and getting perhaps some feedback from this board with respect to the proposal. The property is located in the C1 district, and storage is not a permitted use in the C1 district. It would need to be a use variance, and we appreciate that.
It's located.
I'm sorry, C2, I'm looking at the map, and I can see it's C1, but it is,
It's
Is it
Chappelle
permitted use
Road.
anywhere?
yeah, and I have C2 on the map. I'm staring at C1 and I'm reading C1, but I'm at C2. It is definitely C2, yeah. It's in-
You have it on here.
Yeah, C2 on there, right?
Yeah,
Yep, I
yeah,
understand.
it's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not a permitted use in the C2 district, so we understand that we would need a use variance. However, we thought that it would still, despite the use variance, be a good fit, considering that it would be visible from 61, border 61, although the entrance would be on Shopper Road. And there are other heavier, more industrial manufacturing type uses in that 61 corridor, that this would be a good fit in that area despite not fitting within the confines of that zoning district. So I'll turn it over to Ryan to kind of explain the location, the parcels, and what we were looking to do.
Yep, like Gretchen said, I mean, this is a conceptual plan. So at this stage, you know, what we do is we're outlining the square footage and how we would propose the layout to be. But initially, this is 3 lots that are to be combined. It's the same owner, I believe. This initial lot here off of Chapel Road has a pipeline easement on it, I believe. So there's not much use there. We're gonna bring an access road in to really use the development here in this larger parcel. We're looking at 40,000 square feet as a rough proposal with an additional 20.
That's include the blacktop.
That
area.
includes blacktop, so we would meet the C2 impervious coverage and green space regulations in that. There was, you know, we typically have our design standards for storage units and things like that for aisle access, for fence lines, gate access. So all that was taken into account, but would be further developed moving forward. So what you see in the yellow would be the proposed build out with the future build out in orange.
The site, we would propose to be primarily unmanned. That's why you don't see an office on the building. These facilities are moving more toward people either calling in or going online and reserving their storage and accessing the facility, which will be fenced through a code. There would be lighting and security features within the fenced line, but we think we have sufficient buffer that it wouldn't affect other neighboring properties, and we're pretty well centered with respect to being on the property and then off of Route 61.
Correct. You can see some of these generous buffer yards that we provided here on this plan, 50 foot around the property lines, increased even from the setbacks.
Yeah, and you'll notice on the handout that we gave you, bottom right is just a small insert of the tax parcels. As Ryan mentioned, it's 3 tax parcels, 2 smaller lots that are near Chapel Road, and then the largest lot is where the facility would actually be located. There is a carve-out, a property there that does front on 61 that is owned by someone else, although as shown on the map, we're allowing a 50-foot buffer around that lot. The only thing that would be near that lot would be the drive aisle. Well, and the fence on the bottom.
Yeah, I was wondering what that carve out was.
Yeah, when you,
I can't
Yeah.
picture the, yeah.
I'm trying to get a.
That's a residential lot,
I believe it is a residential lot.
so you plan to do screening around that residential lot?
yeah, and that's why we left 50. I believe 50 is larger than the setback buffers, but we would leave 50 to have sufficient buffering in addition to the fence.
Just to clarify something, I think in the ordinance, section 406.7, I think there's a kind of an issue with the printing of the
Okay.
ordinance. I think that 30% is actually, I think 35% is your
Maximum.
building. 80% is your max
Is your,
impervious.
okay.
So I don't know if that's really gonna impact too much, I'm just kind of trying to visualize this in my head, that site is pretty kind of rolling, isn't it? It's kind of a side of a hill a little bit, so that might not dictate much anyway, but I did want to point that out in case that was. Yeah, it's stuff shifted around in the ordinance, so it's not real clear what those.
It's the building coverage.
So the building coverage is 35%, max impervious area is 80%. It's lined up screwy in the ordinance, so I think that's why it's kind of.
That makes more sense to me.
It does.
Yeah, it's a formatting issue.
But
Yeah.
Would that be that way in yours?
Jason's comment was,
Yeah, see,
It might have got corrected at one
no,
point, I
it's
don't.
still, it's still messed up.
Yeah, so you might want to take a look at that and see if
I
that
appreciate that.
impacts at all. The other thing I wanted to,
I was actually just bringing it up at this meeting because I found the same thing in the ID.
the same formatting issue. The other thing that I was gonna say is if the township is inclined to support this type of use in the C2, that C2 zone is pretty limited. Another thinking out loud here, that use variance is, the difficulty is always trying to prove the hardship. So an option would be, if the township kind of is supportive of this use and the public is supportive of it, maybe you want to amend the zoning ordinance to allow this as a permitted use in the C2 district. In that case, there wouldn't be a use variance, so, but that's up to that would be up to the board.
So it would have to go through the zoning hearing.
No, well,
Board
if you did it
at this
amended,
point?
if you updated the zoning ordinance, that would be, just the board would be, that would be up to the board. And then
Right, that would
if
eliminate
they,
that.
yeah, then they wouldn't need to go to the zoning hearing board.
We just did a standalone zoning hearing for this,
For this?
for self-storage.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we just.
What
we
district
just
was it in?
passed it. I believe it's,
You passed it, there was a zoning hearing, or that you passed an ordinance?
no,
for
we passed
self-storage?
an ordinance for self-storage because we added a whole section of items. to
Where at?
follow. I believe it's I mean, I gotta look at it. I gotta look at the.
Oh, I
it's a
wasn't aware of that.
We just.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if we added an extra district that was allowed into it. That's what I gotta look into. I wasn't sure.
No,
if we
It
added
adopted zoning regulations for.
It
self-storage.
adopted a whole section, so when you go and it says follow this section.
But it was in the I district, you think?
I think it was in the I district, yeah. So it would still need the use variance unless it says otherwise.
Yeah.
We need to pull that off and look
So
at it.
in there, and I think I questioned it when it was approved, I think they put no outdoor storage. I mean, did that incorporate vehicles and stuff in that ordinance? It sounds like we don't have a copy of it. I'm looking for it in my email, but I don't.
Because I remember talking about whether vehicles could be stored on there
Yeah.
and all that kind of
Both
stuff,
RVs.
you know, or not.
Yeah,
That
and Scott
kind of
was
thing.
like adamant about no outdoor
Yeah.
storage, and I don't know what, I mean, I don't know what the idea was there, but that was what he put, that was what ultimately ended up in the ordinance.
Yeah,
I'm trying to see if I can pull it up in my phone.
No, I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
Yeah, we were looking for a specific section on storage.
Yeah, I.
Yeah, and that's why we made it, because there wasn't one in the zoning.
Yeah.
So we made.
I couldn't
we
find it on
Yep.
your, on
I'm in Windsor
I mean,
Township.
they were not in a position to make a decision today, right, so.
No, I'm just recommending, I can send, can I email you a copy of that?
Yeah.
Can I have your?
I'll just say this, projects throughout the county and,
Well,
they-
the other one's down Route 61.
yeah, I mean, there's very little in terms of impacts traffic-wise and utility-wise, so, you know, there's a lot of benefits.
I mean, that was like,
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much.
2 years ago or 3 years ago, no longer than 3 years ago, we did that.
Yeah,
2 years
we did
ago.
that pretty quickly.
More like 2, if I remember. I know, Scott was here yet.
Yeah, yes, he was.
Were there other particular issues that came up as concerns other than outdoor storage when you looked at the standalone ordinance?
I mean, so there are spacing between buildings, fire access. We need to see what districts it's in though.
Yeah, it sounds like the typical list that we run into in the different townships that we work in with these units. So, I mean, we design for aisle access. We've provided Knox boxes with, even if it was just a paper in there that had an access code that they could use to get into the gate, or give them, if it's a fob system, you give them a fob in that Knox box. We've done that for fire access. So I'd be confident that each one of your points in your zoning bylaw, we obviously be able to design to.
And a lot of that fire will be out of the chapter 9 of the IBC.
Right.
We'll cover based on what
Your-
you're building that construction material out of.
Yeah,
Which
they
is
have-
mostly what, steel frame?
It's all steel frame,
Yeah.
and there's limits on your continuous square footage before you have to have a fire.
You can do a firewall.
Right.
And what you're storing. The 2018 changes, and it says that now, depending on what you're storing in there, for some reason, actually, for the first time ever, it goes between residential and commercial vehicles.
Mhm.
So commercial vehicles actually require a firewall with less square footage.
Right.
So, but those will be typical in a building review when you submit those plans and we know what's going on.
So where can someone access that?
He's gonna send it to him.
You're gonna
I'm gonna
send
send it,
the
and
ordinance?
I'm gonna post it online too, I didn't know it wasn't on the website. So we'll get-
I looked, I did not notice it.
No,
but-
it's fine, I'll get it posted and I'll send you a copy so you have a copy. I'll do that tomorrow morning first thing.
In light of that ordinance, do you still think that we should look at with the supervisors, the possibility of amending that standalone ordinance for the C2 district? Or
I think
should
you
we,
should look.
in light of that, should we just
So it
move
hasn't,
forward with these ones?
it hasn't been.
No, it
It passed.
Oh, okay, that's been adopted,
Yeah.
okay.
Good. I don't wanna come in on the heels of just passing an ordinance and ask you to do another one. Does that change your opinion of, maybe I should ask them, or?
Well, I see, I'm only the engineer for the planning commission, so I'm not, you know, some of these ordinances, I don't have involvement. No, it really doesn't change my opinion on it.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, it's ultimately up to the supervisors anyway, but I was just bringing that up as another potential option for addressing that issue.
I think the goal of the ordinance was to kind of limit the self-storage that was, and where it could be located.
Mhm.
Only because at some point, do you have self-storage on both sides of the highway coming into town? You know, right, so, a variance probably would be applicable. Unless you guys think that we want to amend it and make the C2 district this an allowable use. Because right now, it's only allowed in the I district. And is that by special exception?
And the I district is just what you have in gray there on the
Industrial,
map?
Yeah, I mean, what's our,
Correct, yeah, that's right.
what does the ordinance?
Yeah, we don't have any, it's not listed on the website at all.
I have a quick question in regards to this project. Are you aware that the state is planning on widening the road and cutting it back here on that property? And what will be done with the existing driveway of that home there? Will this property you're putting it back become a public road?
The home, well, with respect to the home, are you referencing the home here?
Yes,
Sorry.
Doesn't that home access their property through Route 61?
yes, correct.
Okay. So I don't believe that home would be affected from I don't think the driveway would change for that home at all. This would be a private road.
Right, the state is looking to make the road wider. They're gonna
Okay.
take out that property.
They're gonna take out this whole property?
Not the whole property, no,
Okay.
they're gonna make the road wider.
Okay.
So where your proposed
Don't affect it
units
at all.
are and the corner, they were proposing to make it wider there. I own that property, so I know.
Okay.
The state contacted me and said they were going to make that wider.
You own this property here, the residential?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
And you, is the state changing your driveway, or are you looking to come in from the back, or you don't know yet?
I don't know. All I know is they said they were looking to make the road wider there, and they set out a thing and they surveyed it.
Okay,
And they said they were gonna make the road wider there, so I don't know how that's gonna affect my driveway or your property or looking.
well,
to
we
build
can
on.
we
I
can
don't know
certainly
how
check
much
with
they're going back.
PennDOT for as far as how far it's going back in
Yeah.
here. With respect to your driveway, we're not proposing this as a public road,
Right.
but that's not to say if your property doesn't need access that we couldn't. I think the gate's going to be somewhere up here. It's going to be at the fence. So to the extent that you need a driveway off of our driveway, I don't think we would have any opposition to that for the residents, if that's better for you than coming off 61.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
curious if you knew about the state.
I didn't, and, you know, we'd work with you to bring you in that way if that's better for you. I wouldn't want to be pulling in and out off 61.
Any other things not specific?
We can check on-
Also
Yeah.
ordinance.
On state improvements, thank you. Other questions, suggestions?
Mr. Chairman, you know, in January is a planning commission meeting. So I
Yes.
think a lot of these things can be determined by that time, and you can have maybe a finding on some of the, you know, what's in the ordinance and things like that.
Yeah, we usually meet every other month. January is the beginning
You're
of
off
the new
month.
year, so
Yeah,
we,
yeah, we just missed your October.
yeah.
Well, you said we'll meet again in January.
Yes.
You are going
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
January.
Yep.
Yeah.
Depending on the outcome of that, do you think this board would be in a position to recommend that this is favorable to the board, or that you would suggest an amendment, or is that
I mean,
typically
some
not
of it
what
would
you
be
do?
what, I mean, if.
I know different planning commissions
Yeah,
handle it
I
differently.
mean, that's always contingent upon other reviews, you know, of our engineering and stuff too, of the project.
I mean, me just personally,
You know.
from an engineering standpoint and, you know, in a commercial district like this, you're gonna get fewer uses that are probably gonna generate as much, you know, taxes as this is, but demand less on, you know, in terms of traffic and utilities and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I think, to me, it's favorable. That's just my opinion.
Mhm.
And I mean, also, technically, you can go, you're in the C2 district, you could just go for a special exception for any other use determined by the Board of Supervisors to be the same general characteristic as the permitted uses, if they can generalize that as another one that's permitted.
We probably do it in the alternative.
Yeah.
Every time I've applied for that, I've never once gotten it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I find the boards generally go with the variance if they're going to do it, but.
Any comments? Any questions about? Yeah, I was thinking about, you know, I don't know what the terrain there is specifically, but in my mind, I think hill, you know, and so, you know, those, of course, would have to be addressed and all that, when it comes to the planning.
I mean, in light of the impervious coverage, misprint in the zoning book, would you plan on making this larger?
It
No.
is not our intention to go any larger than this.
No, even the orange is based on market conditions. My client has done a market study and feels that this is the max. The yellow is workable, the orange is ideal, but would not exceed that. In fact, I think we could probably, even with your conditions, could go slightly larger, and we've opted not to do that. We think
Right.
this is the right fit for the amount of market share.
What type of storage are you proposing, just to get out there?
So in the units, there's a couple different sizes of units that's in the chart on the upper left. It's your general residential storage, college kids storing their things for the summer, people cleaning out grandma's house, people getting divorced or building a house and needing places to store things for a while. And on the parking, it's your typical residential, more consumer uses, so boats and RVs.
Okay. So you'd say the general characteristic of the storage is all residential use mainly?
Residential consumer, not commercial.
No,
Not
commercial storage or truck and trailer parking of
No.
that nature?
Not commercial truck and trailer, right? I mean, I guess if someone had a
RV?
horse trailer or an RV that pulled the
Understand,
catalog.
I'm not, yeah, that's not
Yeah.
commercial DOT, that's not.
Nope.
So, okay.
No. My client's done other facilities like this, and they have all been of that character,
Okay,
so
so-
this would be the same.
All right. All right.
We appreciate the feedback, and I will
Thank you.
look for your
I'll send that in.
your
the morning.
email, and I hope to see you all in January. When will you meet in January?
Where?
When?
When?
You know what
The
the deal
third Tuesday.
Third Tuesday,
Third
all right,
Tuesday
very,
of January.
very
Yeah,
good.
Whatever that is,
That would be the 16th.
16.
Okay.
Okay.
All
Thank
right,
you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Before you go, can you see the board?
On the,
You can have this one.
do you want it on the video?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Back up, forward?
A little forward, a little higher.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't have a.
Okay, I believe, let's move on to planning commission concerns. We are in the active phase of rewriting ordinance concerning solar. Mr. Schnell, I guess you have the floor.
Sure, and Attorney Barbier sends his regards. So when we last sat down, you'll recall that one thing we were waiting on was the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors to give us some materials and guidance. After Attorney Barbier and I attended that solar seminar, we were told that would be a few days until we would get those materials. Those days came and went. We asked for an ETA, then it was a few weeks. That ETA came and went. The most recent ETA we have on that is by the end of the year, and well, here we are. So I think it's a matter of them just ironing out a few things. That said, based on our discussions last time we were here and the email that had come in about November from Polly, I put together basically an updated draft of the ordinance and then one other document basically setting out a list of kind of the open items with some suggested language, but that Attorney Barbier and I feel that should be at least given some input either from the Association of Township Supervisors or perhaps sent in for review from the County Planning Commission. There are items that we weren't able to find in other existing ordinances and ones that the concern would be that potentially opening up a challenge from a constitutional or exclusionary standpoint. So that's kind of where we're at. So I'm going to pass these around. Take one and just pass them down.
So at this point, this is still a draft.
Correct.
Yeah.
And under the, like I said, one document is a draft. The other document is basically a list of things that were not, carried over into the existing draft. Some of them are itemized. For example, the items from, Polly, I kind of either put some suggested bold language next to them, or I made a note as to where in the draft of the ordinance I inserted them into. So really at this point, and I realize it's a decent amount of material to digest, at this point, we'd just be looking for, review of the draft in its current state, the list of outstanding items with the comments that are in there, and just to, after reviewing those, to let us know if it would be permissible to kind of share what we have so far with the County Planning Commission to see if they can give us some feedback on the feasibility of these being able to be, passed in an ordinance and not subject to any sort of challenge. And kind of an overall question.
So I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm saying, the dark print, I'm looking at the draft, the dark print is,
The bold is things that have been inserted. Anything that is plain, text is language that had been present in the, current ordinance. So things are pretty much just inserted in there. I'm gonna say there's probably like one line in there somewhere that was crossed out, and replaced with something else,
Yeah.
But anything on this outstanding items that's in bold has not been added.
Correct, yeah, everything on the separate sheet is things that have not been added. But the bold language on the outstanding item sheet is things that, either, I typed, just as a kind of comment, just to put some framing into, this, or, some suggested, language based on what I can, find.
So max acreage or max wattage has nothing next to it? Does that mean it's been inserted, or?
That
It's just a big
means
question mark.
that means that I haven't found, for that particular item, I haven't found any, other ordinance where they set a limit on the maximum acreage or wattage for that particular use. And I guess an overall kind of question with the items that are on that separate sheet is, are those requirements, are they literally just gonna be for commercial solar projects, or is it looking to be imposed on other similar uses of that scale or not?
It's too restrictive. You can't put a max, because it's the same what they try with the warehousing.
Yeah.
You can't, they're not, I mean, we can try it, but it's not gonna work.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, I've seen.
That's why you're not finding anything.
Yeah, and
Because-
I've
because
seen.
you can't,
as
it's
far
the
as
same
I-
thing that Upper Nazareth, they tried to say, you can't give it, like, say, okay, warehouses come in, but they can only be 20,000 square feet. County judge's gonna go, no way, you can't, it's not possible, it's not unconstitutional.
And that's what I believe to be the case, but again, it would be a matter too of submitting the idea for review from the County Planning Commission and the Supervisors Association. And two, once they do just, send out their materials, it may just be in there flat out, plain and clear. But yeah, I mean, the closest thing that I've seen is, maximum, sort of, lot coverage, but it's not like it was for that use specifically, it'd be for a multitude of uses that are similar in scale.
That's probably our best bet of what we have to use right now is our lot coverage percentages for how much they can take up of the farm itself.
All right, how about the lot coverage definition that doesn't have anything next to it either?
Let's see.
where-
So,
which one are you referring to?
I'm guessing you're looking at the bottom of page one?
Yeah.
Okay, so after that, at the top of page two, you'll see I have the current definition as it is in Saldo, and then in bold, definition for municipalities planning code, and I added it in this second sentence. That is one proposed definition, maybe to make it a bit more uniform.
Yeah, I have a question, and maybe this is for Steve. I recognize, yeah, there's a difference in like a sentence or so there from the zoning ordinance to the saldo. The zoning ordinance would address certain issues. Saldo addresses different issues. Is it significant that those are different because of that fact? In other words, there are things that the zoning ordinance addresses might be helpful if it,
Yeah, I think
we'll look at
Dale
each individual parcel. or
Yeah, I think
lot.
ideally something like that, you know, definition of lot or lot, ideally they'd be the same, I think. I don't think it's necessarily problematic. They're two separate ordinances. So, you know,
Yeah.
I don't think it's, you know, I don't think it's necessarily a problem, but I think ideally, there's no reason that they couldn't be the same, I think. You're correct, they do address different,
Yeah,
different
and
things.
I'm just raising the question, you know, whether, was that done intentionally to address Saldo stuff
What
versus zoning stuff?
What probably happened, Dale, you know, thinking back to when the ordinances were updated, I think the direction from the township, and maybe Craig can jump in here, you know, the guy at our office, Craig Pfeiffer, tried to keep the old ordinances as much the same as possible while inserting the language from the model ordinances that we had gotten from the county. Because to update the ordinances, we had to insert certain things to get the grant funding to pay for those updates. So to the extent it affected the existing definitions that were already, you know, kind of established when we had those old ordinances, I'm not quite sure if that makes sense, you know. So I assume that the old ordinances that were updated had definitions in, and if there wasn't anything in those model ordinances that required that those definitions be changed, they probably stayed the same, Dale. That would be my guess, but I don't know that for certain. It'd be interesting to go back and look at the old ordinances to see if those definitions are the same as they are in the current ones, but that would be my guess.
The only thing that crossed my mind, and this has to do with any development, whether it's houses or something, if there are three tax parcels and they're developing all of it, when it comes to stormwater management and all that, you have to treat it as a whole, not as each individual. So you know.
But again, that's the
Because
point, is
well, I
that
think in the
you would
case-
want it to be treated individual.
I think though, Dale, and the difference in that case, Dale, if you're looking at, say, like a residential development where you're taking like you're combining, they're gonna be combined, you know, and then re-subdivided essentially.
Yeah.
But, you know, as far as,
And maybe that takes care of that issue. Well, no.
well, what would probably happen in a residential, you would apply the requirements then on a lot-by-lot basis. So let's say you had three 20-acre parcels that were combined together into 60 acres, and then that was subdivided into let's say a 50-lot subdivision. You would then apply those lot coverages and those building coverages. You'd look at it lot by lot in that
Yeah.
case.
And what about stormwater if you have to create a stormwater basin that,
Yeah,
They'd be
in
looked at
something like
separately.
that, you would probably address it on a regional scale
They'd be looked at
rather than lot by
separately.
lot.
And the reason that I bring this up, like every time, is because if you have a piece of land or a parcel at the top of the hill and a parcel here and a parcel here, you can't say they're all one and then only do the stormwater on this side. What about all the people that live over here? All the water, you built everything on this side because you attached them all, and now all this stormwater is running down this end and you put nothing on this side. All the parcels need to be treated individually. So this parcel, you contain the water on that parcel. Then this parcel, you contain the water on that parcel, and this part. So each one is, I mean, unless the person opts to buy all of them and make them one whole, then that's a whole nother problem to look at.
Okay, so I think that what you're explaining, Josh, makes sense if things are being developed on a lot by lot basis. Then I would agree with that. But in the case of, let's say, a 100-lot subdivision where you have a
Right.
a big
It's all
developer
gonna
coming
be
in.
per lot.
Not in a big subdivision. It's going to be a big detention basin probably.
yeah.
Typically, I'm not saying it never happens that way, Josh. But I mean, like if you have a high density residential development where, you know, Farino's, let's say Farino comes in and does a 100-lot subdivision. Chances are, if they're building all the houses, they're gonna put in, 2 or 3 detention basins and probably do nothing on the lots themselves, other than, some grading to get it out to the street and the inlets and then down to the detention basins. That's typically what I'm accustomed to seeing. Not saying it doesn't happen differently, but, now sometimes too, if you have like a vacant lot somewhere in between other lots, then absolutely it happens that way. And there are some subdivisions, typically ones with larger lots, where you don't have a builder locked in, they just sell the lots, and then it is up to the lot owner to do something on his lot or her lot,
And that's kind of what typically comes before the board. I mean, you have a developer that comes in and he wants to do 20 lots. I'm thinking over there on Hetner Road, and it's gonna, the guy at the top, water, is gonna impact another lot. And so you're treating that whole project as one, so that you can manage the stormwater.
In
for
theory,
everybody.
Judge, you could do it that way. I mean, even with
So
small
I-
lots, you could do it that way if, but I think typically a developer finds it to be a lot more economical to, do kind of a regional facilities rather than, a lot.
I think we have the same concern, is that could be looking at it from different angles, Anyway, my question is, were those two definitions intentional?
Yeah, I don't have an
or
answer.
weren't they?
I don't have an answer.
Or whether
on
it was
that.
by default, in that we retained similar language.
Yeah, I'd have to look back
carry
to
over when
answer
we
that.
wrote it.
I do not
You
know.
know.
Yeah, understood.
Can I ask a question? I'm assuming that all this information here is not gonna end up going to Mountain Trail Solar, correct? All these changes that are being looked at?
This really doesn't have
There's
anything
no
to
way
do
they're
with.
gonna get this information?
Well, this
Really-
isn't gonna affect their project anyway, but once we approve this, which is hopefully by the next meeting, then it's public. It's gonna be on the website.
Yeah, it'd have to be advertised before it would be accepted in, so anybody could see it.
Okay.
But it wouldn't matter anyway, because their
Yeah, it wouldn't
application, because it wouldn't change anything about that, because they've submitted an application prior to this, so nothing would change, even if they amended or changed it.
My only question was, and I think you addressed it, there is no acreage limit that you can do.
Not that I'm seeing on a for a particular use alone. But like I said, it would still be one item that I bring up with, the Association of Township Supervisors and the County Planning Commission, just to see. But just from what I'm seeing, I
You can't
didn't
find
see
it.
something
Yeah.
and the concern is you put something like that is subject to exclusionary challenge, it's a whole waste of, time then if it gets overturned. And I wouldn't want to put, put something like that in a situation where it gets overturned and it's a bit of a void of what can be filled in by a court, if that's
Out there
possible.
by Weaver's, I know there's something going on out there, and you may know this, that they wanted to keep it under 100 acres, that they only did 99 acres.
Wasn't that because of impervious surface?
That could
The
be.
percentage, it's the percent, the only thing that saves us about that acreage thing you're talking about is our impervious. So only allowing 20% will only allow them to cover a certain amount without a zoning relief, which we won't grant, and Richmond Township didn't grant it either.
Yeah.
That's why
Well,
they're,
the reason they stayed under 100 acres, I remember that, and that's why it just stood out to me when you said there was, nothing, but that's completely different then.
but yeah, instead of saying you can do a max acres,
Right.
a max amount of acres, you say, well, you can actually only cover 10% of your land. So that's
And that would be legal to do that if
the
they.
impervious surface, yeah.
It can still be challenged, but that
Yeah.
probably,
It's
that probably
easier to
stands up a
defend.
lot
Yeah.
better than, just saying you can't go over a certain size.
Easier to
For this
defend in our.
specific
Yeah,
use.
yeah.
Yeah.
That would be a
Like,
better
it's-
restriction requirement than some of the other.
Particularly where it's applying to not just one specific use, and it's
Okay.
applying to
'Cause-
uses across the board that are all of a similar scale.
Look, if it got into the C2, they could go up to 80%. But that's why C2's a small area. You know what I mean? It all depends on where it's at.
Okay.
question.
I'm sorry.
I have a question on the draft of section 3. So it says, the second sentence there, solar energy systems installed, operated, or modified within the township after the effective date. So would this not affect the mountain trail?
Correct.
It would not.
It would not affect that, no, because they already filed their application.
But the word installed, like installed, that's the word that's
I see
tripping me
what
up.
you're saying. Yeah, no,
Because they're in front of it is what you're saying there.
well,
The application.
I know what you're, yeah. I mean, you could, I suppose what it should say is, all solar energy systems that have been, filed for and approved prior to the effective date of this ordinance.
So it does actually read presently that they would be affected, since they did not install anything yet.
Right, but you can't
But
affect,
there's no
Change it.
way.
You can't
He's gonna have to change the language.
Well, he'll have to change the
It
language.
would be a
There's
matter of.
no.
So it's written incorrectly at this point, is that what you're saying? It would have to be changed?
Oh, sure, in a matter of
Okay.
semantics, absolutely, but substantively, no.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't make a difference, but, yeah, no, I'm curious if, what I'll do is I'll take a look of how other ordinances address the timing issue, and I'll reword it.
Sure.
Yeah, you're looking for more feedback on the outstanding item sheet, correct?
Correct. And
The light printed areas. Are you looking for, you're looking for more feedback from the board here on what specifically?
yeah, I mean, and some items that have been brought up, like I said, I made note of where those have been inserted into the draft ordinance since we last sat down. But there are some questions that are just asking for clarification, sure.
Okay.
On that previous item, the definition of a lot, I'm just bringing up the question that I'll defer to, the solicitor and the engineer, and the language, that's for sure there. It just raised a question in my mind, whether it was intentional or not, that different language. That being said, if each lot is treated as a separate, is there some unintended consequences that will result from that,
so I mean, the only things that we're really waiting on are the max acreage or wattage, which we're assuming we can't do, the clear cutting prohibition, which I mean, we kind of have some in there, but, and the definition of a lot. Are those the only three things that we're really waiting on?
No, if you go past there, I'd say go like midpoint about, on the second page, about halfway down, or a little bit further away in half. There was one, proposed insertion of adding in 25% inflation increase every 5 years. So, my kind of question was, well, is the idea that, and this is for the decommissioning bond, is the idea that the increase happens every 5 years, or is it a matter of, an increase happens on a yearly basis?
Well, since you said there about the possibility of a shortfall, I guess it shouldn't be written in that way, right?
I guess from my end, I'm just thinking if it only increased every 5 years, and they go to end, or something gets shut down or something like that in year 4, you got 4 years worth that hasn't been accumulated in additional security.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I was thinking, well, in that
You don't want
event,
to short yourself that last year, like you'd be,
Yeah,
for 1 year, you'd be losing everything.
yeah, and I think think from, initial discussions, it would be like a yearly sort of increase for additional security.
Is there a way to cover ourselves for a situation like hyperinflation? Because if we stipulate 5% inflation annually, and inflation goes to 25% annually for
Sure.
whatever
So,
reason, then we're,
is it a matter of instead of a specific number, do you follow like the CPI or some other inflation index for referencing an increase?
I would recommend that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Either follow the GPI
Or maybe,
or a certain percentage, whichever is greater.
yeah, right, yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, put like
Yeah.
a floor
Yeah.
percentage in there, and then that gets used as like a default, but if it's
Yeah.
higher than that, then we can use whatever the,
so 5% annually is the floor?
I don't know, he said 4.
I didn't come up with
What's the
five, I'm just
average,
saying five
what's the
by
average of
25 and
inflation
five.
up to this point, you know? I mean, the last couple of years kind
Billion
of skewed the,
Feels like a billion
20% maybe, you know?
we all hope not, yeah.
So a floor of 5%, and then,
Ask Joe Biden.
And-
or the CPI,
Or GPI, whichever is
higher.
greater. On, yeah.
And that's on an annual basis,
Correct.
to your point, yeah.
On the, another item on that decommissioning, I think on, yeah, I'm not sure, it was on, the new one is on page 3 or,
Excuse me, Mr. Solicitor, can I ask a question? I'm just curious, as a township resident, why Mr. Frederick has anything to do with this ordinance or anything to do with solar, being the fact that he is to recuse himself from the other solar project, and for some odd reason, if their application gets thrown out and they have to reapply, he's directly going to have his hand in this ordinance, what he should have nothing to do with. He should have no voice in this ordinance because he's presently involved in a large project involving solar in the township. I mean, I feel that he could be opening himself in the township up for litigation if he's part of the process of making a new ordinance right now, and his case is still open and being listened to. So I feel that if he recuses himself from one solar incident, why he should be the guy running the meeting here for this particular ordinance for the solar.
So your question is, can a planning commission member recuse himself from an instance of a solar development project, but also be involved in an approval or disapproval or recommendation of an ordinance?
Correct. He's currently recused himself from a solar project, which he's largely involved in. And currently he's trying to be involved in making a new ordinance. It's a conflict of interest there.
My preliminary response would be that they're too far attenuated of subject matter to make a difference. But that, that being said, though, I mean, I'm filling in for Attorney Farbiar's. You know, he's been
Well, it
doing.
might be a question to ask him, because if for some reason.
What I'll do is, I'll take your comment, under advisement, see if I can find any authority that would change my preliminary response. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, my opinion is that Dale is an elected official, elected by other constituents of Tilden Township. He must recuse himself on the solar project of Windsor Township. He must recuse himself on that particular solar project because he is a direct beneficiary of that solar project. As of this point, this has no bearing on that solar project.
Well, if the application gets thrown out that's in court now, well.
Correct.
Because he'll have to reapply.
Right.
And then he's part of making the new rules.
Well, but I mean, he's part just as an opinion basis. At the end of the day, it takes 3 of us to vote this in.
Okay.
So I mean, if he's an opposing vote, then I mean, then we'll go that route. But at this point,
Because
I
he
mean,
keeps asking questions about the parcels of land.
and because they're good questions.
And that's the same problem he's having with all the projects.
That's the problem.
It's just coming up here. So it's
But-
like, it seems a little,
So Dale's
I just wanna make
Dale's
it
been
known
here.
to everyone.
I mean, probably. I mean, you're one of the longest, if not the longest. So I mean, as far as historical, factual information, he's an asset for us to have here, because some of us don't know.
Well, he intends to make the most money out of everybody that would be on the board too. So you have that argument.
I can understand your position, but I agree with the solicitor in the fact that this is not, he's not directly correlated to this ordinance, other than at some point, if his project would get overturned, they would have to follow these rules that I'm spearheading, Polly is also spearheading, and, you know, everyone else is kind of offering their 2 cents. So, I mean, it's a team effort to get to a finish line, and we're all working to get here at the end. I mean, Dale's been nothing but helpful in this process, and hasn't, in my opinion, has not tried to fumble. I mean, he's asking good questions, so.
Okay.
But if the solicitor finds a reason that it is a conflict of interest, I mean, I'm sure Dale would be happy to recuse himself from this. But in the meantime, I mean, I need, I'd like as much input from not only everyone sitting here, but also sitting over here, which I think we've been as open as possible from everyone that showed up at the meeting, and trying to take all of your ideas and criticisms to heart and put them in this ordinance. We're getting close to a final answer. Unfortunately, we're having to work with, other bodies that, I mean, they don't get back to us, we're kind of limited. And if they don't get back to us, I think, we would have to move forward with what we have, just so that anything coming down the pike at least has to follow all of these new regulations, and maybe the, 4 or 5 outstanding we have to clean up and, re-advertise and re-adopt. But if we can do that in one fell swoop, it will be cheaper for the township ultimately.
And let me ask one question. Could we send this to the county planning? Could we have the approval to send this to the county planning to kind of get one ball rolling?
Yeah.
And then, let's get this going, because we've already kind of said, hey, we're in October, get your ideas in by December. So I think let's get it to the county planning commission and go from there. So if you have any real issues, let's.
So how far does our draft have to be to send it to them? Like, will it come back, will it bounce back to us again?
Yes.
It would, okay.
Yeah.
Like, the decommissioning thing still blows my mind. I'm not sure how we would foresee something so far in the future, or even in the near future. We just don't even know. And I know,
That's why you want it to be a lot of money.
right, yeah, you don't wanna mess this up. And I think there was talk once about hiring some professional that would know.
A third party?
Okay.
I think it would be a great idea to hire a third party that has no correlation with, obviously, any, so we can get good numbers and.
I think that's what's gonna hurt the township.
And I think actually the third party should be chosen by the supervisors. That should be we should have that.
The problem with all of that, though, is even if we pick a third party that says, as of right now, this is what it's going to cost to decommission, and we can have 20%. If somewhere down the line, the government says, well, solar panels are now considered radioactive waste, and it becomes a totally different, now they need to treat it like lead. A dump truck load of lead soil from Hamburg is like $25,000 to get rid of. And you can't foresee that stuff, or something like hyperinflation. How do you see that? I mean, that person isn't going to know that. So it does give us a good starting number, but we don't know what the future is going to hold.
Well, and the problem is, right, they're also working on a federal and a state law, I believe, for a number for decommissioning.
Yeah, the state law, I saw, maybe Justin can weigh in. The way I interpreted that was to basically protect the actual property owners. It didn't necessarily address the municipality's concern.
Good.
So the property owners are going to have a concern with the panels being decommissioned, that the company follows through and decommissions them, but it doesn't really, from what I can tell, it doesn't really address the township's concern. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're making sense. I just read a little bit about it.
I think, I don't know if that.
I didn't know if they'd have.
On the property owner.
Correct, yes.
Instead of the township, the property owner would be responsible for what?
Well, I think,
isn't
yeah,
covered on decommission.
I think the intent of the state legislation was to protect the actual property owners in that scenario. But even if that scenario were to happen, you know, the township's going to get dragged into it if the, you know, if the developer or the energy provider, you know, just goes defunct or bails out, you know. So there's a number of, you know, there's a number of potential concerns, not with just the property owners, but obviously with the municipality. So I don't know if there's federal legislation. I haven't seen that, so I don't know what.
I was looking into
Yeah.
it. I would have to, I wanna look into it more. It's just not enough to read. And if anyone has information, you can email me. I'd like to, I don't know.
I did see something already where they were trying to protect, like the townships, if, you know, when it comes to decommissioning and stuff, if there wasn't enough money there, it would go to the property owner, would have to pay for the cost.
What happens if you don't have money?
Well, I guess the
Could
rest
you,
of the
could you go,
family
could you
would
go
be
after,
able to-
could you go after Med Ed? Could you go after, say, Med Ed, who took the
They
energy?
were just buying the electric.
Right.
Imagine
I don't
Med Ed would be like,
I mean, somebody would have to pay for it.
you know how Med Ed
It would
is.
either fall on the township or the property
The
owner.
reason I have gray hair is because Med Ed.
So we did the 25% inflationary increase every 5 years, but then there's another one here. 80% of total cost of project install plus 10% increase, that should also be changed.
Right, yeah, and my kind of comment on that was instead of 8% at the initial, why not, you know, after it's, you know, after we just have it as the, you know, full cost.
So yeah, I mean, I
So-
think that's good, so full cost and, you know, same verbiage as you're using in the
Yeah, it's essentially combined,
So
and
you're
it's just
saying
two separate points. but-
decommission cost would be the same cost as the install? Is that what you're saying when you said full cost?
Well, so that's, apparently, that's what we had in here originally, but now we're saying we should have a third party ultimately determine what that decommissioning cost would be.
Right.
Yeah. Is that in here yet?
Yeah, it's in like, let's see, '01. Section 301. I know it mentions the retention of, you know, a third party engineer being retained.
Independent and certified professional engineer shall be retained by the township, but paid for by the landowner, applicant, or owner of the commercial solar energy system, to estimate the total cost of decommissioning, net salvage value of the equipment, which will be considered decommissioning cost, with such estimate to include an administrative and inflation factor of X per annum. The estimate, along with its administrative and inflation factor of percent per annum, shall be used as the amount of bond or other financials. On an annual basis, the landowner, applicant, commercial solar owners should provide additional security to maintain fully sufficient coverage for the decommissioning cost. So, I mean, this is already in here, so I guess we can get rid of this section, because we're going to have a decommissioning cost determined by them. But the percentage should be, you know, made to match the verbiage that we're using for the inflationary increase.
Right.
If you look at Mr. Heckman's theory, how do you know that person has the money to back you up to get decommissioned? Let's use Mr. Frederick, say his solar place goes under, do you have $1 billion to clean your property up? No, you don't. It's cheaper for him to declare bankruptcy, and he can walk away.
Yeah, but at some point, the property owner has to be held responsible.
How are you gonna get blood out of a
before the
stone?
township.
How you get blood out of a stone, he has no money. Where you-
Well, but so that's the point of
Money is
this.
in the property
That's the
owner,
surety.
is what,
That's
is
the
why you
surety
go
bond.
You gotta have
after.
insurance somewhere.
That's the surety bond that
That's
we're
the
talking
point of the
about.
That's why
bond.
we
That's
would,
why you
yeah.
get a bond.
That's
The
the
point of this bond.
percentage.
So this
They can't
bond-
get out, nobody can get out of that?
I mean, I guess the insurance company
Don't
can go belly
call
up.
everybody.
See, the municipality is gonna have its own bond to cover its own ass. The property owners that have solar panels on their property, they should have their own bond with the energy provider, the developer. So there should actually be two layers of protection here, you know, for
Okay,
decommissioning, so.
I understand that, what happens in 35 years, he's no longer living here. Then who gets it?
That's a great question, because
I mean, your age, you know, and 35 years from now, you may not be living
I
here.
think, it-
I probably won't be living here 35 years.
the municipality almost
I'm not
needs
putting a
to,
solar
would
field in.
almost need to be somewhat involved or with the bonding between the property owners and the developer. We'd at least want to have records of that to make sure that there is protection between the developer and the property owners. And then the bond that the municipality has with the developer, that's kind of just a second layer of protection. In my opinion, if the developer goes belly up, you know, that should be on the property owners to take care of, because they're the ones that, you know, got
So
into
are we
business.
are we requiring that in the
I wouldn't want to
ordinance or
see
not?
his kids be
No,
responsible.
I get it, yes, yeah.
Surety bond, a bond for
No,
the
just,
township
just,
and a bond for the.
yeah, that's what we're saying, so we can just have visual of that, we want a copy of that to see the bond. I don't-
But is that
I don't
standard
think-
practice to have a bond on either side?
Well, so I think what I was saying, that state legislation that I read, I think that, I don't know where it's at right now. I think
I would think
that
it'd be one or the
legislation
other.
is going to require, from what I can tell, there to be a bond between the energy developer and the property owners.
That's what I thought.
But not the township?
I didn't see anything in the draft that I saw that addresses anything between the municipality and the developer. That's what this is for. So this is covering just the municipality, which would, in theory, also kind of cover the property owner if you had to implement it. But, you know, I'm of the opinion, let's have both layers there.
Yeah, I think really, the property owner should have a bond attached to the deed of the property. So that deed is protected by the bond at all times.
I mean, so I don't do projects like this all the time, so I mean, are bonds like insurance policies that need to be paid up every year? So if the developer opts not to pay it, then the bond's no longer good, and then it like lapsed, and then
What would happen like his case, say you have a bond, if your real estate's only worth $1 million, but decommissioning's 35 million, they'll say, take the property, I'd rather give you the property than pay 35 million to clean it up. Who's gonna protect yourself though?
But if the bond is made for 35 million and it's attached to the deed of the property, it always covers the township. But it has to come from the owner, and when it has to be attached to the deed, like a deed restriction. Just like when you build these new developments, you put deed restrictions in, this house can't be blue, red, pink. You're gonna put a deed restriction in that this bond has to travel with the property. So the people gotta get a bond and keep it in effect. You know, if that bond goes out of effect, you know, they could put a judgment against, I guess, the property or the estate, you know, but the bond has to stay in effect. But the way a bond works is you only pay a minimum amount of what it's worth. It's kind of like, so the bond
Unless you
has
use
to be
it.
enough to pay
Unless
enough
you use
money,
it.
you know, unless you use it, but it's like, you know, but it would have to be renewed on you can get them 5-10 years out, you know, so if you get a bond for 10 years, you gotta pay it up for 10 years, but it's gotta be put on, not personal name, it's gotta be put on the property deed. So that way it travels with the property, not necessarily the owner. You know, if that property's taken over by somebody else, or if they go bankrupt, it's gonna be on the property.
I'm assuming the reason it was done this way, though, is because, you know, I mean, if Dale doesn't check all the time that these guys have paid the bill, or, you know, doesn't get his mail or whatever, I don't know how that works. I'm assuming they would send you, hey, this is lapsed, just so you know. The township is then responsible. Ideally, there's always an administrative person here that's going to get a notice and then can follow up with, you know, whatever legal action is necessary to make sure they enforce it. That's probably why it's on the township and not.
When the solar ordinance was passed, you know, back in 2017, I mean, there certainly wasn't anything at that time that required any bonding between the potential energy developer and landowners. So I mean, this would have been our only layer of protection for the township at the time. So, you know, if that legislation passes, okay, then that's even better, I would think, you know.
Enough to go forward? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess, do you want to ask ask Russell, or if you can get a
Clarify
hold
that,
of
yeah.
I mean, Pennsylvania, I mean, who should
Yeah.
the decommissioning bond be between? And is there state legislation that's trying to set it up that it must be between the property owner and the contractor? And in the event that the property changes hands, how is that affected and made sure that it's continuing? And, I mean, are there, I mean, I guess my question would be, is if the bond lapses, who's notified? Can we be added, like on an insurance plan, I can add an additional insured, and then they're notified of any major changes in that policy? Can the township at least be added as an additional insured and then notified if there's a change? If in fact it needs to be between the landowner or the deed and the operator.
One additional small item regarding that decommissioning. It says to be completely removed in 90 days. For a large project, that's not doable, I don't think. That's a pretty small time frame. I don't know, what would be, at least in my mind, they would take,
Well, like
longer than, by the time you line up
Oh.
I thought it was
contractors to
tight
do
too,
that.
and then to reestablish, whatever.
Vegetation.
Right.
Yeah.
But
No,
I've
it's
seen,
unrealistic.
but I've seen 90 days on other ordinances.
Yeah, but
So somebody must.
90 days to pull the solar panels and get us 3 months of work, that should be sufficient. But this, you'd probably want 180 days to establish vegetation.
Okay.
So you'd want 90 days for the removal of the panels, and then you want another 180 days to establish. I
In
worked
addition-
on multiple of these in Minnesota where they're like 10 to 15,000 acres, and they gave them 90 days to remove panels, and then 180 days to establish vegetation.
An additional 100 days,
To
okay.
establish
Once a
vegetation.
development, like say your housing development gets done, how long do they have to,
Housing development?
6 months, a year?
We typically, they have, about when the last house is done for the
Yeah.
zone, for
Yeah.
all the vegetation stuff, usually 180 days. And it depends when it's done.
Yeah.
So the way you have it written doesn't make me feel like the revegetation is required within that time period. It just says that after it has not been used for commercial generation purposes for 6 months, they shall be removed completely within 90 days of the issuance of an enforcement action. And then as part of the complete removal of the commercial solar energy system, the site shall be cleaned, restored, including the restoration of soil, and revegetated to blend with the existing surrounding vegetation and to prevent soil erosion and down gradient sedimentation. The removal of commercial solar energy system and cleaning, restoration, and revegetation of the site is sometimes hereinafter referred to as decommissioning.
And that's the part where I had said, one of my comments was, are we including that in the 90 days? And then his first response to me was, somewhere there, he did change it, but now I guess we're changing it once again to an additional 180 days.
I'm with you.
All right, so we're gonna add a 180-day stipulation. Does that include the 90 or in addition to the
No,
90?
addition to.
In addition.
So like all the mechanics are gone in 90
Yeah.
days, and then you start working the land.
Yeah, then the
to
6
get
months, 6 months is plenty of time to get in there and start working the land up, especially with the size of the company. And again, we have to, you have nothing to go off of either because you're looking at, there's not been one decommissioned
Ever, right?
solar
Yeah.
panel yet.
The soil, subparagraph 5. So it says it's on page 5 and it says added subparagraph.
That got shifted, so it'd be page 6.
Where are you referring to?
This on,
Section W, page 6.
so we're on page 6,
Middle.
5.
Yeah, it was page 5, it was changed to page 6, sorry about that.
So, I mean, that's good. It's basically all the soil needs to stay on site, so that's good. paragraph 3, section W.
Yeah, and just to paraphrase my kind of comment to that, yeah, like the requested provision was that all stormwater management, facilities would be installed before any construction would commence, and me not having any engineering wherewithal, I'm not sure if like different phases of construction of this require different types of like water runoff management based on what phase you're on. I don't know one way or another.
So once you put water retention in place, doesn't the vegetation need to grow first before you can just like start construction and letting water run in there? I mean, that would probably create problems, I would think.
No, not, there's,
They could put
there's
that down or something?
so a lot of times on a big development, where there's, acres and acres of earth disturbance, you'll have what they call a sediment basin, and that's typically your ends up being your detention basin, but it'll accept water, when the site is completely bare. But it's designed, it'll have different components to it. So, for example, we'll have what they call a skimmer. It's like a plastic thing, kind of hovers on the top and dewaters the facility from the top rather than let it flow through the bottom. That let sediment settle out. So, to answer your question, yeah, they are treated differently, and they will take water when it's dirt.
Justin, what other major questions did you have in here?
As far as locating a battery storage facility in the center of the project, what means is determining like the center of the project and what range? Like, would the epicenter be determined by like the existing lot lines, with like midpoints of all of them drawing into the center, or would it be based on like the boundary lines of the project?
I mean, I would say the location furthest from all property lines. So, I mean, I don't know how you would put that in lawyer language, but whatever is the furthest from from all property lines meets in the middle.
Okay.
Is that what you guys have in mind? I mean, if somebody, if they have
Or residential lines, I don't know. I mean, these don't have,
I mean, the
these
idea
don't
was
have batteries
fire,
anyway.
right? That's what we
So
did.
there is no conflict of interest here,
Yeah.
I mean, there is no battery pack type of in these situations.
Yeah, and moving
I mean,
forward,
what if
there
we just
probably
said
are
shall
some,
be generally
you know.
located in the center of the site, or
Yeah,
something,
Away from.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want someone else's property essentially burning down or toxic fumes because it was located too close. So I think that's good. Road impact study? Is there a question here?
No, I inserted some, the language is just some proposed language. Again, anything on this, sheet, I also want to, have reviewed by the county planning commission, because.
Do you think you'll get an answer back from them quicker? Have you dealt with them at all? I mean,
I never have specifically.
have you?
If
Berks County Planning
Yeah.
Commission? Yeah.
So they'll get back to you relatively quickly?
I mean, would they have a 30-day review period?
I'm not sure what it is for ordinance. I don't know if it's different with ordinances
I can't remember.
compared to plans, but
It's either 30 or 60-day review period. That's
they
fine.
they typically respond pretty quickly.
Oh, what the hell else they do? It's the county.
The noise portion, does our noise ordinance, I mean, I would assume for all construction projects,
Yeah. I mean, the environmental standards in this zoning would attest to that, for noise.
which
and
is not
decibels
going to
all
make it
that.
Monday through Friday though, I presume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that? Environmental protection standards. It's like 60 decibels, it's a lot now.
Does it stipulate any time though?
Getting there. I'm sorry.
I thought you'd have this all memorized.
Yeah, yeah.
It's only an inch thick.
It's only an inch thick. 608. So, yeah, we do. We have residential, public space, open space, agricultural, institutional, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Commercial or business, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 65 decibels, sound limit level at the lot line.
What does that sound like? Can you whistle at 65 decibels for us?
A dog barks less than 65 at a lot line.
That's annoying in a lot line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I do a lot of court. I'm in court a lot with a lot of dogs for property maintenance stuff. So I've done those. I've had the sound meter, and I can tell you right now, a dog barks less than that.
Parking or unloading areas. So you have this added here, but you have it in this section. Is that because you still want them to review it? Number 4 at the last page.
I want them to review it.
I mean, yes.
Okay. So to your point of will these items only be for commercial solar energy projects or for other similar projects, is that for all of these questions 1 through 5?
Correct.
And I guess if we're going off of the exclusionary basis that we keep talking about, we would have to make this for, I mean, all large-scale projects of any kind, right?
That's, yeah, I mean, obviously the battery one is very, specific to
Right.
this type of project, but, bar that, I mean, that's the inkling I get. Again, I don't have any express authority that tells me that, other than, what I'm seeing and not seeing in other municipalities' ordinances, and hence why, we want to have some insight from the.
So the road impact study is one of those things that, do we require that anywhere else?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, on all
So-
major development.
So we require them everywhere else, we require them in this one.
Fair enough.
Battery storage, as you said,
Do you review this? Road impact, do you review that, or does that go to?
I haven't been, if we've done them in the past, then it must have been reviewed by.
Most of them have been went through the state.
Oh, you mean like traffic impact?
Yeah,
study?
yeah.
There, we haven't had many projects that have, where we've needed them. If there was a development that it was required, we would review it.
And we're not there, it's in phase 3 and 4 down here for Crispin Lake.
Correct, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so we have really, but all large-scale development would see some type of road.
Yeah,
traffic
yep.
impact.
So in other large-scale development, do they strip all the topsoil like they did by Weavers?
I mean,
Because that's one of the questions here.
That's a crazy scenario. I mean, they do strip topsoil. I mean, you think about it, you're doing a house, you're stripping top, you're doing a warehouse. Look at, they strip a whole base. I mean, they're gonna strip a whole mountainside for a warehouse in I-80. You know what I mean? So they do, but I'm just saying, I think you can try to limit it.
Some of this stuff has to be solar specific because what other application covers 400 acres of property and it's sprawled out over the whole thing? Like there's only,
Windmills.
but even those would be even way further apart, right? Because their blades can't touch and they're 100 feet long. I mean,
Yeah.
and how much
And now they're
impervious
gonna have-
surface does a windmill cover versus a solar panel?
I
Probably a lot less.
yeah.
Is
No.
the land under a windmill blade considered impervious? And what happens when it moves? So is it, I mean, that's a question, right?
I don't know. I would have to look at. I don't know.
But I mean, the reason that we put this in here was because of in Fleetwood, they stripped all the topsoil off and that created problems. Now we're making them keep all of that dirt on the property, but we want to limit how much they can disturb. And if we do make that,
Do it in phases.
but if we make this across the board for all building projects on large scale, I mean, my question is, are they doing that on other projects? where they're stripping all the topsoil off? Or is it just where they're putting the agricultural building and everything else is
Well, most of the time. Most of the time, it's just where they're putting the agricultural building, the storage.
the whole thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Hmm.
Good issue went out, so.
So in the event that we have something that can be contested, the only piece that is then potentially up for grabs is that contested piece, right? Like, we have a whole ordinance put together and they contest the soil stripping.
Yeah.
That's the only provision that
That's-
is considered
We
a
always-
problem. Everything else still
We
sticks.
would always include a paragraph that has like severability, basically
Right.
saying if any section of this is declared to be unconstitutional, the rest stands, as if that portion.
With the exception of if we put 100 things in there that are like super limiting, then they could throw the whole thing out and say this is ridiculous.
I mean, if you would take it literally, if there was like
Yeah.
101 things and 100 of them were, suspect, and they went through and they took out everything but one, I guess.
Okay.
Like the most extreme example.
Then I don't know that that needs to go across the board, but I would say that, for the solar project, it makes sense, considering we have an example that they have, dire consequences from. Some of that would have to be, when, you should keep all the notes that we're making for this, and they should be attached to the ordinance at the end, so 10 years from now, when there's 5 new people sitting up here having this conversation, we can say, these are the projects we referenced and why we made these rules when we did, and change them.
The only thing that I just wanna bring to this whole thing is, we wanna put in front of the planning commission, but there was recent legislation, I don't know if you saw, for soils, for ag soils in Adams County. So a judge just ruled in favor of rejecting an application based on the classification of the ag soils that the panels are gonna be placed on. And I'm guessing if that's a win for that community, my question would be, could we put ag soil classification in this as well?
What does that mean in layman's terms? The soil is special?
Yeah, like there's different types of classes of soil.
In Pennsylvania, I believe it's 3 classifications.
It's more than 4.
Yeah, no, but for farmability, for growth of major products of wheat, corn, and soy.
It's like how fertile the soil
Yeah,
is.
yeah. For example, Makunji was like the highest in the country.
Wow.
So, anyway, long story short is Adams County, or I believe it's Adams County, I could be wrong, but that just happened and the county voted that no, because of this classification of ag soils, you cannot build solar panels on this property. So now I'm just wondering, due to
Is
recent...
that because there was a stipulation in an ordinance somewhere, or is that because they just said, we don't want the panels here because the...
I do not know, I just thought we could just take a peek at that and get, but I don't wanna throw something in here and...
Was it at like the Court of Common Pleas or Commonwealth Court?
I believe it was at the,
I mean, I know it would have.
I believe it was at the Commonwealth Court.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I believe that was the Commonwealth Court.
Okay.
And I can forward you it because I've been digging and I have it saved on my computer.
Okay.
So I can forward, because I just wanted to be up to date as much as possible.
Any comment?
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. So the class 1 through 4 soils, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture says you shouldn't build solar on those soils. So I don't know if that's what you're referencing, but the lawsuit you're referencing was the Mountjoy Township one that did go to the Commonwealth Court. I do have a copy of it, so if you want, I can give it to you. Like
Yeah, I have the copy of it as well. I have it saved on my computer, that's why I brought it up, because I was just reading it, so I'll send that over to you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll send that to Russ. And I gotta send that later, this self-storage thing. Alright.
So we're gonna submit this whole thing, including the outstanding items, to the Berks County Planning, to the Planning Commission, and hope for a response by our next meeting.
That's the plan. Yeah, and of course I'll clean up, the things that
Everything we've
we
discussed,
brought up
yeah. Right.
this evening. I took notes as we were talking.
I have a thing here from the siting of solar panels for the Department of Ag in Pennsylvania. And like she said, it says here that class 1 through 4 soils should be avoided. So I guess legislature just has to act on that to make.
Yeah,
it
that's the
not-
problem. It should be avoided. There should be wordage that says they have to be avoided.
not-
But the problem is now that we've had a court ruling on it, we have something to go off of. We just need to read the whole hearing in depth and see what did they classify. They're saying just, I understand 1 through 4 should be avoided, but maybe they're saying, yeah, but 1 and 2 for sure,
Yeah.
you should, you know what I mean? That's what we want to figure out. And I'll send it to you, you can figure it out.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is sometimes when cases are reported on, sometimes what they call the dictum gets the headline, which is the stuff that doesn't hold procedural weight or not.
True.
But no, sounds good.
We need to look at it. All right.
Well, good work getting us this far. I would have loved to have had something to actually vote on and act now, but I guess,
Either way, it would have to go to county.
right.
Yeah.
Next month, maybe we'll have a really close to final draft that we can.
Will it be in February, January? Do we meet in January?
January.
January, sorry.
It's like the reorganization.
I will not be here for February's meeting. Just so you know.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I appreciate the public comment about my role, but I just want to reiterate to the board here, last meeting I mentioned that I don't feel I should, I will withhold my vote, put it that way, on this. I feel I should be able to voice my input.
You live in the
You know,
township, so at the end of the day,
and
you
I-
could sit right there and you could still voice your opinions because, I mean, you live here. So, at the end of the day, if you're willing
So
to not
that's-
vote on it, I think that's.
I'm trying to be as careful as I can, so that's kind of where
What we're
I'm at.
discussing
So I'm-
here has no impact on what you're doing,
Right.
because that's already,
We wouldn't want you to be a deciding vote anyway, so I mean, I don't think that I don't think that it's gonna matter.
So anyway, yeah, that's going forward, that's my position at the present. But I appreciate the observation there.
Excuse me, can we get a copy of that as a member of the public, the working draft?
It's a working document,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a problem giving you a copy.
but
I don't know.
what's the appropriate thing to do? That's where that comes back here.
it's not finalized, it's
you know,
not a
it's-
finalized.
Yeah, I
whatever.
think with right to know request.
I mean, there's no,
I
Finalized version, it's just.
No, I don't think you can just yet.
I mean, you can't have copies of notes.
I don't know.
That's why I asked about making sure it stays here. You know, that mountain trail wouldn't get a.
Justin, you're the ultimate say, buddy. What do you
No,
say?
I think,
I would think that you'd have to submit a right to know request, and then we'd have to review it as far as what you're required to disclose or
It's
not.
not an official document yet, it's just notes.
They can look at it.
Yeah,
Right,
I
no
know.
request, notes?
yeah, but I think we just want to make, I would clarify with Russ, just to make sure we're not,
They don't see.
don't you
the
think, or,
No. So it's-
I don't know how this.
Do you want me to just throw mine in the garbage and then?
I really don't care.
I'll edit that part
Yeah,
out.
make sure we're not breaking any-
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So this does say action on solar and wind farms, like, we're not talking about wind yet, right?
Well, we just put it in there. Well,
So
just
zoning
say
officer
mine
concerns,
is
there's some
fit.
formatting issues in that book that we need to figure out.
Yeah.
okay.
That's the only section specifically that I'm aware of.
And, and bin mining facilities.
I think we should have a motion to direct the solicitor to forward the draft for the county.
Okay.
Plan commission for review.
I'll
Do
make
we
a
have a
motion.
motion to forward this draft to Berks County?
I'll make it.
We have a motion,
I'll second it.
we have a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And if you know anybody that you can push it through, Steve,
I actually, I don't know anybody rural well there, but I think I can get them to move on it.
pretty
It's
please.
just the size of a baseball bat.
Tell them they have to review it on Christmas Eve.
Zoning officer concerns?
besides these recent formatting issues I just was made aware of.
Okay. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll move that we adjourn.
I'll second it.
We have a second, all in favor, say aye.
No, I missed the Flyers one.
The what?
The Flyers game.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yes, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.